This is Radical Love Live, an ongoing series of podcasts and special events where we explore faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. So it's another episode of Radical Love Live, and we have a special guest, don't we, Kelly?
Yes, we do. Today we're talking with Kimberly Stover. She's a writer and podcaster and social media influencer, and talks about deconstruction and faith and a lot of other stuff. I'm not even quite encompassing the work that she does here, but anyway, Kimberly, welcome. We're really glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me here.
Kimberly,
So, yeah.
hello. So let's get into a little bit about all this awesomeness that you've been working on. And I think the first thing is I'm intrigued by the name Sin Blossoms. I think Kelly is too. So tell us, share a little bit about where that name came from.
I was driving in my car and Gin Blossoms was on, the awesome band from the 90s. And it just came into my head. I was like, Sin Blossoms. And I started to think about it. And a lot of times, the very stuff that the church calls a sin was actually what helped us thrive in life. So leaving the church, asking questions, relying on your own understanding. Those are all sins, but they helped me thrive out of the church. So that's kind of the roundabout meaning of Sin Blossoms.
Oh,
I
got it.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, kind of growing out of that fertile soil of, I guess if you got to start breaking up the foundation a little bit so you can grow in it.
Exactly, because the foundation crumbled at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey, sort of like where you started and how you how you ended up kind of where you are now, faith-wise?
Yeah. I grew up in a Baptist church. My grandfather was the pastor, so it was home to us. We went every time the doors were open, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. It was my second home. And I really tried to believe it all growing up, but I always had questions. I always bugged my mother since I was a little child, 5 years old. I didn't quite buy all of it. And I was very sensitive too. So I was scared of these things I was learning about being left behind in the rapture and hell. And it traumatized me as a kid.
Terrifying stuff.
It is terrifying.
God loves you so much, he's going to leave you behind.
Yeah, and you learn about this before you can tie your shoes,
Are you kidding? You were hearing it yet at such a young age?
Yeah.
So at what point, like you said, so if your grandfather was the pastor, I was assuming you were hearing him preach then. So that you're saying as what, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, kind of in that time frame where you were starting to hear this stuff?
Oh yeah. When I came home, my first panic attack was when I was 6 years old because I came home from school and nobody was there. And I thought that the rapture happened and God took my family. So I was freaking out, running all over the house and yard and trying to find my family. And so I had this idea, okay, I'm going to call my grandparents and see if because if they're not raptured, then the rapture didn't happen. So I found
so familiar. Yeah.
So I found their phone number in the church bulletin and I called them, and it was just such relief that they answered the phone. And, my mom and my sisters were out doing something. It was no big deal, but it was terrifying to me, and people just giggled. They thought it was funny.
Oh, isn't that cute? Wow.
Yeah.
So did you get any explanation? Okay, that's cute, but you were traumatized. Did they know that you were traumatized from this?
I was very scared, but my mom thought I was really smart and clever for thinking to look in the church bulletin for my grandparents' phone number.
Oh, okay. Yes, that is smart and clever.
Yeah.
I will.
Well,
Sure.
When it sounds like there was nobody there to say, no, honey, the rapture isn't real. You don't have to worry about it. Like,
Oh,
in that
absolutely
culture, it's a real
not.
thing.
Oh, yeah. I believed it until I was 29 years old.
Okay. So I guess I don't know if you can see me or not, but I just my jaw dropped again. So I have to say straight up, Kimberly, I'm so glad you're here on this episode with us. I think we are talking with somebody here that Kelly, I can't recall that we've ever had quite such a point of view about, what it was like for somebody so young to be directly exposed. And you say you resonate to this. And
Hmm. Hmm.
talk about my religious trauma, but you probably are on a completely different level. So I guess you're going to hear me ask more questions and kind of want to understand that. But you're saying, so from your first memories up to 29, you had this belief system about rapture.
Yes, and I knew that the term rapture wasn't in the Bible. I learned that in my early 20s. So I knew that something wasn't right about it, but I was, I guess, seduced by this doctrine of escape. I used to watch Jack Van Impe. I was obsessed with it in my 20s, and that makes me sound like a huge nerd, but
Uh,
I was fascinated with all the horrible headlines, and you know, Jack and Rexella would talk about how all of this means that Jesus is coming closer and he's going to come get us all soon. So, yeah.
Okay. So for us that are ignorant, I'm raising my hand. I don't know who you just referred to, and maybe some of our episode listeners won't either. Who are you talking about, and what was this about?
Jack Van Impe and his wife Rexella had a televangelist news show where they would look at headlines from around the world and they would fit it into end time prophecy narrative. So they would, um, let's say the 9/11 headlines.
Mhm.
They would fit that into end time biblical prophecy and come up with all this prediction about world players in the end times. And yeah.
they're like pre-millennial dispensationalist superstars. Like they are, they're like the Anderson Cooper of that world. Like the one that you look at and go like, oh, I trust them. They know what's really going on.
I know about Rapture, the Left Behind series, and people that wrote books, but this is missed. Wow. Yeah.
I'd say the more you go down this road, the more you start to understand a lot about what's going on in American politics, like why, even if climate change is real, people are like, I don't care. I'm not going to be here. Um, and, lack of care of creation and like short-term gains and, all this stuff. Cause they're like, I'm going to be gone and I have no responsibility to manage civilization or to care for my brother because my world is all about personal salvation. That's, I mean, that at least that's how how I remember it. And, kind of, you can see politically that certain blocks of voters, have that belief. Like, I'm not even going to be here.
Yeah, they're not interested in really making policy changes because they don't see anything being lasting. They think we are here for a brief moment and that's it. And the world is going to be destroyed after the rapture. And this is just kind of a moot point in our existence.
Okay. So Kimberly, your grandfather's a pastor of this church. Your family is very active in all of this. And you say up until 29, you were believing this. So what was this like kind of share with us what was a church service like? Whether it was a Sunday morning or a Sunday night or Wednesday, what did you guys talk about? What were the sermons about?
Well, I only went to my grandfather's church until I was 10 because my parents got divorced and we moved across town.
Okay.
And then I started going to a First Baptist church, and the sermons were about, I would say, my grandfather's church. My grandfather was obsessed with the rapture just like I was. He found it very fascinating. So I think he spoke on the rapture a lot. Um, but the sermons that I heard in the First Baptist church that I went to, they're just similar, talking about Paul's letters to the churches and getting saved and staying away from sin. Same kind of sermons, probably. I don't know, because I've never been to a progressive church, so I don't know what their sermons are.
Oh, right. That's why I was asking from your perspective. Yeah, clearly they would, my experience was a wee bit different, but you were active within this. Wow. Yeah, like I thank you for sharing that. It puts it, you put a face to what I now can appreciate, because Kelly and I have talked about this at some level, and I read, of course, but I'm fascinated that we're sitting here on the other side of this conversation, and I'm just can't wait for us to keep digging in about, what you do with Sin Blossoms and just your entire faith journey. But there became that, is breaking point the right word, where you said, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, I had my children and I didn't want to raise them with some of these beliefs. And that is when I really started to ask questions and dig deep. And I saw that you had Jay Baker on your show.
Yeah.
And Jay Baker, one of the first books that I read that really set me down a different path was Fall from Grace, his book, Fall from Grace. And I resonated with Jay Baker so much. And he had another book too that I read. I can't remember the name of it. It was maybe his Son of a Preacher Man, I think is what it was called. And he really was kind of my gateway out. And then I got reading Rob Bell, and I resonated so much with Rob Bell. I was just like, oh my gosh, I have been saying this stuff my whole life. And he was kind of a kindred spirit, same thing as Jay Baker. And after that, I just studied my way out. But I would say that the seeds were already planted, because I went to University of Michigan and I took classes such as anthropology and philosophy of religion. And so
That's heresy. How dare you do things like that?
Yeah, I would feel so guilty in anthropology. I thought I was sinning because I was holding the fossil record in my hand, a replica of it, but
It was a replica. That was man-made. You know that,
you know,
right?
wait. But I was learning these concepts. The world's
Gosh.
millions and years old, and I was taught it was 6,000 years old. And I wasn't taught about bipedal hominids, and I wasn't taught about any of that stuff. So that blew my mind, and that made me really question everything too, because I had to, okay, how do I reconcile what I know about prehistoric man with this literal interpretation of the Bible? I can't.
It's interesting that um that faith was still part of the dialogue, because we've talked to some people who, once they started reading, they started, they started really thinking about the theological implications of the rapture. Like, the good shepherd is actually going to desert 90% of mankind. Uh, that there's a certain bitterness, and they'll remove themselves from the church, be like, this is all nonsense. It's interesting that, um, that faith is still part of the conversation for you.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what I believe in, really. I feel that I'm an agnostic for the most part. There are still some supernatural ideas that I believe in, but I would never expect anyone else to believe in my supernatural ideas, because I can recognize, hey, this stuff might not be true. What I believe might not be true. I don't know who I'm asking for guidance sometimes. Am I asking nothing? Am I asking ancestors? I don't know. But I still have those conversations. but I'm just not sure who I'm talking to.
And I noticed on your website, and this might be an older post, that you used the phrase "an agnostic student of Jesus Christ." What does that mean? How does that resonate with you?
I wrote that 5 years ago.
Mhm.
I feel that my relationship or my idea of Jesus has changed in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
I no longer view Jesus as the end all be all. There are some things that I disagree with what he said. And so he
Mm.
doesn't hold this deity pedestal to me anymore. More
Mm.
like a person, a human that I respect and can learn a lot from, but there are many other humans in the past and present that I can also learn from too.
Mm.
Mhm.
So I don't have that same type of uh view of Jesus I used to, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
I love that. Um, and the fact that you said that you've evolved over the last 5 years. I know I personally have. Kelly, I would think you would say the same as well.
Definitely
Yeah.
have. Yeah, I faced um, some challenges that definitely just caused me to be real. I mean, there's a point where you got to be authentic, and you can only hold on to old ideas or old images for so long. And with that in mind, I actually wanted to ask. This is something I'm always curious about when somebody makes a change from the faith of their youth. Is if you if this ended up causing conflicts with family and community, and if so, how you were able to navigate those.
Well, luckily I never bought into I only should have Christian friends. So I always had
Mm.
friends that were kind of the riffraff, right? I was
Uh-huh.
rebellious in high school. I liked to party. I was friends with everybody. It didn't matter if you were Christian or atheist, didn't matter. So I didn't lose any friends coming out of this religion, but I did have conflicts with family, of course.
Mhm.
And that has been hard. But I just really try not to take it personally because I understand that they are all indoctrinated into the same system as I was. And maybe if I hadn't have been obsessed with this religion and obsessed with deconstruction, maybe I would have never made it out. But
Mm.
they're not obsessed with it like me. They're not out trying to read every book they can about all of this. They're not interested in atheism. They're not interested in Buddhism. I am interested in
Mhm.
all of these things.
Mm.
So I just try to really not take their rejection of what I do. They don't even acknowledge what I do. It's
Oh,
just
interesting.
they don't talk about it. They don't acknowledge it. Um,
Hmm.
and
That
and
must
that
make Thanksgiving and Christmas interesting.
I haven't been to a whole lot of Christmases and Thanksgivings in the last since Trump was elected because I've been very angry about that.
Mhm.
Oh,
I've
there's
I've
okay.
I've avoided as much as I could,
Yeah.
and it
Mm.
makes me sad
Sure. How
to
can I
have
not?
to have to do that. But I was so angry about they've embraced this man, and I could not believe it. And
Mm.
so, yeah, Christmases and Thanksgivings have been very rare, and
Mm.
COVID was going on, so that was an excuse to not be around
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. Um, but yeah, we're still healing. My
Mm.
family and I are still healing, and I don't you can't rush something like that. It's a big deal. It's a big family rupture. I'm not alone. There's a lot of people in my shoes. So,
Well, thank you for sharing. Is that part of your uh, reason why you do what you do? Is to share, so that others who are going through the same um, hurt? Because yes, this the rupturing of a family, especially when somebody does what you did, and goes out and starts seeking. Um, do you, has anybody reached out to you and shared their own stories. Is there any
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
connection of that? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I have had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in the last 7 years since I've been doing this publicly.
Yeah.
And I also am a support group leader with Recovering from Religion. So I listen to a lot of stories in those meetings as well.
Oh, didn't know that. So tell us a little bit about this program that you've got going on.
Oh, Recovering from Religion, the
Yeah.
organization is
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit, it's run by volunteers. There's virtual meetings and maybe some in person now. I'm not sure because we went to all virtual, of course, because of COVID.
Yeah.
But there's a meeting every day that you can attend virtually, a support group for people that are having doubts or concerns or they're having trauma,
Yeah.
whatever. We're not therapists, but we're peer support, I guess.
Exactly. I'm fascinated by I didn't realize that, Kimberly, and I apologize that I didn't read up on this event. So for our listeners and for me, learning as we go here. So recovering from religion. So if I was struggling, I could reach out and I take it. It sounds like these are online or can also be in person, depending on the city. But um, is it a agnostic atheist or is it you describe how it is. Like if I came in, I'm still question my faith, but I want to keep my faith, but I'm not sure how I'm going to keep my faith. How does that work through the peer support?
We aren't there to deconvert anyone. We are there to meet anyone where they're at on their journey.
I
And
love
s- and it's all different sorts of religions too. So I've
it.
spoken with ex-Muslims. I've spoken with Mormons and Jehovah Witness and Seventh-day Adventists and all sorts of different religions. It's very fascinating because once you start talking to these other people that are having doubts about their religions, you
Mhm.
realize, wow, our religions are very similar. And
Yeah.
we're dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true, Kimberly. That is so true. Wow, I am. Thank you for bringing that up coincidentally, and then and just teasing that out a bit. So, yeah, let's put a plug in there for where can if somebody listening to this episode, where would they find out more about this program?
It's recoveringfromreligion.org. And there is also people can call in and have text, chat support, or phone support if they need immediate assistance.
Okay,
Or they
and
can find links to the virtual meetings too.
is there any fees for this, or is this donation based?
It's donation based.
Wow. Great. Excellent. Good news. And so you are one of the facilitators, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, Kelly, welcome back. So
Did not get raptured. Actually, just had some connection problems there. Yeah, believe me, I'm gonna be still behind.
yeah, you're not going to be
that
raptured. No way. You're going to be one of those left behinds.
Yeah. I'll be like a chaplain of the rapture. Be like, hey guys, guess what happened?
So Kimberly and I were just chatting while you were having some technical difficulties. She was sharing about recovering from religion.org and her participation in this as a facilitator and it being a peer support group, both online and in person, where folks can go and actually have conversations about how they're questioning their faith and doing some of that deconstruction work. I think might be a good way to describe that. And it's not about deprogramming. Maybe that's Kimberly. You used a better word.
Deconverting.
Thank you. That was it.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's not about deconverting. It's just simply meeting people where they are in their own faith journey. And folks like Kimberly is a facilitator to that kind of conversation, which I think is freaking awesome. So
I think that's great. Yeah. One of the things, and you guys might have already talked about this while I was away. One of the things that we often address on this show is religious trauma. I know that's certainly a huge area of focus for Mark and the work that he does.
it is.
Is that something that you talk about in recovery from religion?
Yes, we talk about our trauma in there, but we're not coming at it with a therapy approach because we're not therapists.
Yeah.
We're
Hmm.
there as just peer support.
Mhm.
Got it.
But the value of that, as somebody that is a member of a certain 12-step program, I would think there's a lot of commonality in that. And one of the values is folks in the same situation just sharing their own experiences and realizing I'm not alone. There are others who feel the same way as I do and have the same challenges about whatever it might be. And so there's a lot of comfort and healing that could come from that alone.
Yeah, it sounds like it's great to have a safe space
Yeah.
to be able to ask those questions. Because I can remember being in very conservative Church of the Nazarene in Indiana, and being in my Sunday school class and asking some questions that the teacher definitely did not want to answer. I mean, it was definitely they were definitely leaning on that kind of like, don't let the wisdom of the world lead you astray. Our faith is foolishness to the all that business. But
Wow.
I feel like if we were given these brains or evolved these brains, we have to ask these questions.
Especially
Yes.
if you're just a person who naturally asks questions. If you're predisposed to be very curious, and how can you go through a religion and not ask questions when that's truly who you are? Is I wanted to know about everything. I love to learn, but I had to feel guilty because I love to learn. And
Hmm.
it just
Well said. I like how you said that we are predisposed to curiosity, and that is me. And you have such clarity to that, Kimberly. Really, and you're right that that's going to run afoul of a lot of theology where folks are to believe what they are told, and regardless of who's telling them, right? It's like this is what you're going to believe, and you question this, then you're going to fall off the track, and then all this doom is going to happen to you because you did that, and you invite this on yourself, so you get into sin, of course, or worse, or you're not going to get raptured or left behind, and all that stuff that comes along with that. Was that was that part of the motivation? How did you balance that when you were in that period of while you were still, pre-29 and like, were you on the down low when you would ask questions and do curiosity? How did you explore? You said you were, in college, but who were you telling? And yeah, kind of what was that like?
well, a few of my boyfriends, I never dated I only dated one boyfriend that was a Christian too, but he was a deconstructing Christian as well at that time. So we would talk about this kind of stuff together.
Yeah.
But my first major boyfriend was an atheist agnostic. So I always had friends and boyfriends that I could talk about this stuff with.
Did your parents know this? Now you said your parents are divorced, but like
Oh,
whoever you were talking to, did they know that your boyfriends were atheist?
atheist agnostics. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I would like sugarcoat what they believed in a little bit, you
Yeah.
know? But yeah, I was always very rebellious. I always had friends that weren't Christians, so it was never a surprise that I suddenly didn't go to church every Sunday and believe in all this. I was always pushing back. Always. Even as a kid, I was pushing back on, why do I got to wear a dress? Well, who cares?
Hmm.
Jesus doesn't care about that. Well, I was always being annoying to my mother probably because I just didn't buy into it.
Mm,
And
mm,
maybe I'm just a natural contrarian or whatever. I don't know, but
mm.
I don't like rules or stupid rules. So, and a lot of the stuff in the fundamentalist church are rules that don't make any sense to me, or
Hmm.
they are not liking people because of certain things, they're they're a part of that church that doesn't believe in the Bible across town. That's
Hmm.
I just never bought into it.
Yeah, they're affirming gay people, or they're talking about social justice and building heaven on earth,
Well, and
all that stuff.
this experience really uh caused me not to trust the church when I was around 10 years old. My favorite Sunday school teacher came out as gay.
Hmm.
And uh, the way that all of a sudden who he was as a person changed overnight
Mhm.
because now he's gay, even though he was the nicest man, friendly, nice, kind. I didn't like that at all.
Wow.
I didn't care that he was gay, but now he couldn't be my Sunday school teacher. Now he had to go to a church across town that affirmed his existence. And that hurt my feelings at 10. I was just really bothered by that. So
So did they kick him out? Was it like a public?
no, my grandfather had way more empathy than that. I
Mm.
think he was very conflicted about that. Because he had, when you're a pastor of a church, you kind of got to play a little politics too. And I think that that hurt his feelings as well, that he had to go along with the standards of that church. Because this man later went to my grandfather's funeral. So I know that my grandfather treated him with a lot of respect. And I think he was loving towards him and everything else, but it was just that's what had to happen when you go to a fundamentalist Baptist church. They're not going to have a gay Sunday school teacher. It's just not going to happen. So,
Right. At least not one that's out.
exactly.
Yeah, it's okay if you're in closet. Yeah.
Right.
That's
And that was a new kind of I don't think anyone really knew how to deal with that because this was rural Michigan. There
Mm.
wasn't a lot of gay people in my community at all. So I don't think anyone knew how to handle it, but they just handled it from what they had been taught and indoctrinated with, which are gay people are an abomination and this and that. So the compassion wasn't there. The understanding wasn't there. The affirmation wasn't there. And
So you bring up a point, being queer myself, right? And, that's something I talk about on a regular basis and part of my anger towards the institution. But I also have learned to be a little bit compassion, show a little bit of compassion to folks as you just described who may not be exposed because if you live in a rural community, somebody may be queer in the community, but you wouldn't even know it because they may have to hide that because of their, protection of themselves. And so therefore it roots that. And it's only when we get to know somebody that we have the capacity to understand what their life is like and learn how to actually love them like we would love somebody else. And so in there's a space of forgiveness for the folks that maybe because they just simply don't know better. But then once you know, then you know, right? You can't undo what you have learned. Um, my point in that is I see why though as a 10-year-old you were asking those kinds of questions, which I think is brilliant. Um,
well, and it caused me a lot of problems too and trauma because hearing
mm,
the rhetoric and seeing how he was treated over
yeah,
coming out as gay, when I realized I was bisexual when I was 12, 13, 14 years old,
mm,
now I internalized everything I heard about how he was talked about. And so now I have to live in secrecy. Now
mm,
I can't be honest about what I'm thinking or who, it was hard
mm.
because I
that's the
knew what people were going to think about me if I was honest and say, hey, I'm attracted to both girls and guys
Yeah.
because that's the truth.
Mhm.
But I had to stuff that down and I became, uh, I guess, homophobic, even though I was bisexual, because that happens a lot, that self-hate. You
Yes.
kind of, and I remember writing a paper when I was 16 about how awful being gay is and how,
Mm.
and meanwhile, I'm bisexual.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just, it's amazing how they can really make you hate yourself, you know?
Have you forgiven yourself for writing that paper?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I came across it years later. We were going through my mom's house and looking at old school papers and stuff, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, it was in there, and
Mm.
I read it, and I was so disgusted with this paper. I tore it right up in front of everyone, threw it in the trash. I was like, "This is gross." And I couldn't believe it ever came out of my head. I just couldn't believe it.
Well, but you were in a situation that set you up for that.
Yeah.
Your story is a reminder of what happens when we are exposed and we have conflict. And as you said, the self-hatred loads in, and then you, we will believe things are that actually harm ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and that combination of fear and secrecy is so toxic. Like having to hide your authentic self and then being afraid not just of people around you, but like on a cosmic level of of being authentic. And that's so toxic. And it makes me sad to hear and see people that are in those situations. And and even you were talking about your grandfather, and I've known other pastors, and we've seen some people on, we've talked to some people on this program who you can tell that the people around them love them, but they can't allow themselves to accept them because of what they believe. So their own love for the person is in conflict with the fact that they have a very literal 20th century reading of Romans 1, and then there you go. And those situations make me really sad. I wish that we just as a society could be more open about our dialogue about it and be like, do we really think that God hates these people because of who they love?
And who they are.
Anyway,
Well,
I'm on
because
my soapbox.
Mm.
the facts are a lot of these people didn't have a chance. They were raised and heard this kind of stuff since they were babies. I made it out, thankfully, but I really didn't have a real chance to make it out either. So it was luckily I made it out.
Mhm.
Mm.
And
What do you think well, you were always questioning, right? And so I get that, the natural curiosity, like you said. Was it college that started this, or you, because you mentioned that too, or is it just an entire, just the cycle of your life that's you got to the point, and you said your children as well, and you didn't want them to learn this type of doctrine. It sounds like it was just one thing after another. It was just drip, 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 drip. Okay, oof. Is that an accurate assessment of your progression here?
yeah, the first question I remember asking was, Mom, who created God? Because that didn't make any sense to me. I was 5 when I asked her that,
Yeah.
and she said, "Well, he always was, and he always is, and he always will be." And I remember just, that doesn't make any sense. Um, because it doesn't make any sense to me, and it still doesn't. Who created God, right?
Right.
And,
It's
so, I'm a little kid asking those kind of questions.
same questions as like, Bertrand Russell, I think, was asking that question.
It's like you're a 5-year-old mystic asking those
Right. You've
questions.
only moved because you're right. I mean, because when people are like, who created the universe? You move the problem just one step back then, well, who created God then? Um, and the whole idea, like he exists outside, well, he, uh,
Mm,
but the idea of like existing outside of time and space and causality is you're using a solution that has not been observed or proven by evidence to explain things that you can see, touch, and feel.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was always asking questions like this. So,
Mm,
and my youngest son is the same way.
mm,
He asks these deep cosmological questions about existence and, say I can see, wow, that's who I was as a kid. But
Mm-hmm.
he's not stifled in the way that I was stifled. He's
Mm.
allowed to think all sorts of things and ask
And
any question he wants. And he doesn't have to feel guilty asking any question he wants.
amen. There you are.
So
How old is
it's
Right.
he?
really cool. He's 11.
Uh,
So
so here
that's,
he
and
is.
it's
Yeah.
so
Go
great
ahead.
to create, well,
Yeah.
just to create an environment where questioning is safe and allowed, I think makes so much of a difference in the mental and spiritual health of the child. My own observation as a dad, we
E-
try to do that in our house as
Exactly. I
well.
think you're going to get to the point, this honesty, this rigorous honesty that you have taking place with your kids, and Kelly, you do the same thing with your kid. What a difference that's going to be, parent and child relationship, but also, just the overall, their worldview.
And it's fascinating raising your kids without the religion and observing what they feel about religion. Because the other day we're in the car and we're fighting about music, they want to listen to this, I want to listen to this. And I said, you don't even know how lucky you are, because when I was a kid, I had to listen to this Christian music and hymns and stuff in the car. And so I put on some hymns
Mm.
so they could see what I had to listen to. And my youngest son was telling me, "Oh my gosh, this is so scary. I don't like this. This is this is such scary music." And I say, "Yes." And he affirmed what I felt as a kid about hymns. I thought they were very scary. I didn't like it. So it's just interesting because our kids can kind of affirm things that we felt when we were kids, but we didn't have the freedom to express it.
It's been a great conversation, and we've just been bouncing all over the place, and
I
that's what I
know.
love. I love how we have these conversations. They just go where they go. But, as in the few minutes that we have left, I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about other passions that you have, what you're doing, what you're writing about. So please
Where people
spill.
can find you.
Yeah, what's going on with you?
You can subscribe to my newsletter at sinblossoms.com. That's also the name of my podcast, Sin Blossoms. However, it's kind of being neglected because I cannot figure out my sound. Just sounds awful, whatever I do. But I will figure it out.
Yes.
And all my links are in my bio on Instagram, Kimberly_Stover_writer. So you can find my TikTok account and Facebook. I'm mostly on TikTok. That's my favorite platform.
Okay. So enlighten us a little bit. What are what are you putting out there on TikTok?
I talk about deconstruction
Yeah.
and politics, current events, my hot takes at the moment.
Hmm.
I enjoy TikTok though a lot because you get plugged into a certain audience and it's very it's less toxic than YouTube, I guess. YouTube, I put a video on there and I'm getting all this troll comments and Facebook is the same way.
Yeah.
TikTok's a little bit more niched in. So that's what I like about it.
Because of their algorithms, right? Because if the viewer reacts and goes, for one, then it'll start feeding the viewer similar content. So maybe that's it. I'm guessing because, my own experiences with TikTok, but that's a very important point that you bring out, though, the toxicity that's directed towards you, because what you're doing, I'm sure, you can get a lot of blowback.
Oh yeah. I've had to really learn how to not take any of that personally as well. And
Oof.
it's hard
Yeah.
sometimes.
I was gonna say
Especially
It's
that sounds really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really commendable that you still maintain uh like a really positive vibe. Like I've seen some of your videos online and I just I get this like kind, positive vibe from it, which I would be hard for me to maintain that if I was getting like a firestorm of trolls every day who felt like I was threatening their God.
I'm really happy to hear that's the vibe I get from us, because it's kind of surprising. I struggle with that, I guess. I've gotten better. And in the beginning of me doing this work online, I was probably more angry than I am now. But I was on Twitter a lot at first back then.
That's like Thunderdome.
And wow, Twitter was a very toxic place.
Yeah.
But a lot of good conversations were had on Twitter at that time. And in 2016, 2017, wow, that's really when the evangelical movement started to take off, and we all kind of started to come together and talk about this stuff. So
Are you a part of a group that a gang of ex-evangelicals that you share space time with at all, formally, or?
No, I'm not. I use the hashtag #exvangelical that Blake Chastain came up with, because it's just it's a brilliant hashtag, and it's easy one for people to find deconstruction content and bring the conversation together. So I do use that hashtag a lot.
Yeah.
Just so it makes it easier for people to find content created around this discussion. So
that's awesome. I hope our listeners who are curious about that will follow that, look for that hashtag when they're on social media and find some of this content.
This has been a great conversation. I feel like, Kimberly, sometime I would love to have you come back and talk even a little bit further. This fascination and some about what that is actually to believe rapture, and that kind of that. I'm stumbling for words. Like, I know it exists. You're the first person that I've had a conversation with that actually was a part of that for so long, and actually, what was that life like? Like, because I simply have not experienced that, and how your worldview from that. So I don't know, maybe we can bring you back sometime in the future when we can have that conversation, or anything else you'd like to talk about. So.
I would love to come back. I have a lot to say.
I love it.
I never run out of things to say.
I love it.
Awesome.
And for the record, like Kelly said, if you just put off this awesome vibe, and it's because of your authenticity. You are living out who you are. And it's beautiful to see. And it's so uplifting. And, in this conversation that our listeners hear, I hope they feel that exact same vibe that you put off, because, yes, you are, dare I say, one of the lucky ones that got out and has, you brought yourself to your full own wholeness without, having to lean on, some kind of a religious institution to tell you, what's good and what's not. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate all those kind words. And you can also find me on my website, KimberlyStover.com, and all of my information is there too. And I hope to connect with some of your listeners. That would be awesome.
I would think that would be great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This has been really, really enjoyable.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks, Kimberly. All right, folks. Well, another awesome episode of Radical Love Live with our guest, Kimberly Stover, who just, again, we are so fortunate we have great people in our company. So we'll catch you on another episode. Kelly, thanks as always.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, co-hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. All rights reserved. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and other popular podcast platforms. Go to radicallovelive.com to learn more about us, watch recordings of our live events, and listen to our podcast. We also invite you to check out what Kelly and Mark are doing by going to our websites. Find Kelly at kellywilson.com and Mark at markdilcom.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.